Welcome to Nevermind the Furthermore. Wait a minute, this music isn't right, the scene isn't right. Hang on. That's more like it. And now it's time to the show for all creatives. Nevermind the Furthermore. Your source for conversation, inspiration, and fun. With your host, Nicholas Anthony Tockert. He's an artist, a writer, a swordsman, and a game designer. He knows how to use the sword and axe in historical battles without anybody getting hurt too much. He's also the Manatee Man, master of marketing. And he may even have a guest or two. One thing, though, to be certain. Just don't call him a cryptid. With that, it's about time for the show. So sit back, enjoy, and have some coffee and chat with us.
Good morning, Nevermorians. Hi, folks. It's your host with the most, Nick Tockert, coming at you on WNTF, Nevermind the Furthermore. Now, normally I'd be here giving you a bunch of stuff, talking about my books and stuff, but we have something far more important going on. So before I get into it, chat, I love you, but you're going to be a little neglected because we have a guest today. So let's just see if I can get him brought in. And we've got audio. Good morning, Bonsart.
Well, good morning.
All right. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell folks what you do for the ones who don't know who you are?
Hello, I am Bonsart Bokel. I am best known as Radio Retro Future on YouTube. Since last year, I'm also a published author, the creator of the Association of Ishtar, which is a series of steampunk/cosmic horror stories that I've been writing for a couple of years now. On our website, www.associationofishtar.com. And recently, I am dabbling for the first time in crowdfunding. And tomorrow, we're going to launch our very first Kickstarter, Color the Multiverse, which is a coloring art book with all types of scenes from the various short stories and also or novels. And later this year, my first novel will also come out, Bound for the Sticks. Of which the digital version will be part of the upcoming Kickstarter.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I'm insanely excited to see this Kickstarter come out because it's for a coloring book.
Yes.
And I love adult coloring books. Now, guys, I mean for adults, not anything not safe for work, guys. Come on, be mature. But what prompted you to arrange a coloring book? I mean, I find that fascinating for someone who is not a self-described artist to go, what my world, what my universe needs is a coloring book.
It's a strange set of circumstances. First of all, that I just finished Wrench in the Machine, and I'm going to a lot of costume events, and where a lot of children are going around there. But I also finished my first comic. It was a really short comic called Esper the Sixth Call Girl. It's based on the first story I ever written for the series. He's also the main antagonist in The Wrench in the Machine. And that had not been a very good experience. I mean, the artwork turned out well. I'm proud of it in that regard, but the artist, well, let's not say I'm expecting to work any time with him again soon. So I realized that I needed to find artists that I can rely on, people who actually care about the universe,
Right.
and most importantly, I can trust. And so that's how I came up with the coloring book that multiple artists could participate in. I was also very curious to the various perspectives on the Association of Ishtar Universe. So it really came about from that, perspective. And yeah, it's a very strange thing to start out with.
Well, I
And
find it delightful. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah. Well, also, but the thing is that I also, these projects cost a lot of money, so I hope that I'll make it back with Kickstarter, so I can invest more freely in other projects. I mean, tomorrow we'll do a stream in which Johan Alexander, one of my main artists right now, will join us. I'm very happy that I found him for this project. We hit it off right away, so that's great. We have very shared family histories. My family is originally from the Dutch Indies. My mother and her family are war refugees, and they his family is also has very powerful ties with that colonial past. So and I really also wanted to do something with that in this series. And we have one drawing, which is also a colored, which was one of the main images in the Kickstarter, which is of a Garuda, which is one of the deities from Indonesia. And that's something that, I grew up around
Right.
those things. So, and that also makes a very prominent comeback in my upcoming book, Bound for the Sticks, which is about arcology. And yeah, I'm not sure what the question was anymore, but oh yeah, about why a coloring book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's basically what I wanted to achieve with the coloring book, to get to know various artists, have a product for the kids, and just
So
see
it's sort
that
of a sampler both for you of the talent that's out there, and for the people who are looking to get into the Association of Ishtar universe. Very shallow waters to start. Ooh, this is an interesting character. That's really a brilliant approach, I think, because that's going to one what we sort of imprint on. I find as children that's outside the mainstream is
Mhm.
something that becomes a very strong resonance with us. So something that stands out, like I've had the privilege to see some of this art. It's very striking. It's incredibly well done, and I hope you can get uh, content. Make arrangements with some of those artists to continue doing comics in your universe, or even full length graphic novels,
Mhm.
because it really. I'm a great lover of that pulpy. Uh, it's that place where pulp and almost a hint of noir overlaps with just cosmic horror. I'm an old Lovecraft fan. I do
Mhm.
nothing to hide it. I love HP's work, but your universe is just so plumbable, and it reminds me a lot because a lot of my early reading was fantasy, and a lot of people, that can be derogatory, but there were several really great shared fantasy universes that were out there. Thieves World comes to mind. Obviously, Forgotten Realms is much more well known, but I think you're really building something here that you're having to do the slow work of laying this groundwork so that other people can build on it, and it's just a fascinating prospect. Now you're someone who is sort of I don't want I hesitate to say the originators of steampunk, but I really think you're someone who really condensed and coalesced what that means in face of the shifting tides and the if you love it should have slapped a gear on it approach
Mhm.
that so many people have now. How does that how does your comic I'm sorry, your coloring book that's coming out reflect your definition of steampunk? Because I feel there's an authenticity there that, oh god, my SCA nerve from way back just fired off. Sorry, reflex. But
Yeah, I have been a reenactor, so I also have this thing with the word authenticity. But okay, so there's a lot to unpack in that question.
please take your
And
time.
it is a very important reason. I mean, arcology is in a sense also kind of my reflection of what the steampunk community is. It's also a kind of a condensation of at one side of what they want, but also on the other side the types of stuff they delve into. And I often use the term of that steampunks are kind of the antiquarians of pop culture, because we often too often the steampunks are compared to the Victorian era. But the reason why they are so fascinated with the Victorian era is because of the early pop culture things, that came from the late 19th century, like early 20th century, like Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, those authors that kind of like the great work of what Mary Shelley, what we now consider to be pop culture. And the start of that, the type of fiction that was aimed at a mass audience. Now I'm just talking about science fiction. But the same goes for the early writers such as Pride and Prejudice, that type of literature. It's the start of a mass pop culture, and steampunk draws a lot of its inspiration from there. And I see steampunk more as a source of inspiration, a collection of bygone pop culture references than this idea of let's the aesthetic. Like, my definition of steampunk is that it actually is three different things. I maybe it's also a meme. I have no time yet to investigate that, but like, it's an aesthetic, it's a costume culture, but it's also a genre of fictional stories. And when it comes to the genre, I define steampunk as cyberpunk in the past. And I kind of like dialed that to 11 in A Wrench to the Machine, which is literally about cyborgs in the 19th century. Which, I mean, The Wrench in the Machine, it's kind of an obvious reference for any sci-fi
Oh, absolutely.
aficionado. And I really love that title for that reason. Bound for the Sticks is more, well, I wouldn't say fantastical sci-fi, but it's more classic sci-fi, in the sense of like the early, like, let's say the first half of the 20th century sci-fis of writers actually exploring an alien world and what that would look like and how that affects the people surrounding it. One of my big favorite short stories, which is also very prophetic, The Machine Stops. I forgot the author's name, but it's a far underrated story that everyone should read, as far as I'm concerned, because it's so prophetic. Like, it protected social media, it protected the influence it would have on people, where society is going, and especially when you're living in the 1920s or 2020s, you're like, this is all they all predicted it. They all knew where it was going in 1900. They predicted everything. So far that the people in the past were dumb.
Yeah, it is. I think we have we have an engineered worship of both youth and newness, for lack of what the new thing. I don't want to say progression, because it's not always progress, but it's always, look, there's something new and shiny. And steampunk, to me, has a different balance, where it realizes the quality of the the older concepts, and then the creativity of wielding them in new ways, which that manifests in the technology. I designed a mecha combat game. Of course, I'm going to have a bit of a
Stumpy boat robots.
thank you. But I have a great love for the aesthetic in the machinery, and I've always had that. I'm the guy who will go to the old steam shows, and just literally the idea of watching the gears work is something I find fascinating
Mhm.
because it reflects the the mental processes it takes to make mechanical things do processes that we now would not dream of doing anything that wasn't digitally produced.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's a groundedness to it, and then they take this oddly grounded base and do these wonderful flights of fancy. Now, when I talk to people and when I seek people I want as guests, I was very glad you contacted me because you contacted me as I was planning to contact you. I'm I'm interested in the people who are doing things, the people who've made the leap from creative to creator, if that makes any sense. That is one thing if this channel's and this show is going to lean into, it's the spirit of helping people make that jump from being creative, because we all know a lot of creative people, but many of them don't have a direction of how to manifest that properly. And I'm not even saying in a money making way, although that's part of it. As you said, you're
Mhm.
experimenting with crowdfunding, but in the spirit of manifesting what you like in the world around you. And you have been a driving force for European steampunk for a very long time. And
I wonder if they would agree with that, but
they may not, but then again, many times when someone starts the ball rolling, the next generation or two in any organization will do what they can to try to you know divert that because they want to change the momentum. So you have to change the origin. Uh, it's a very American news media approach to facts, but I've seen it happen too much. But what now we have a similar background because we both come from a recreationist background. I was SCA for
yes.
about 12 years. Uh, you did several groups and basically got a lot of that started, from what I recall of our earlier conversation.
I started some I started a costume group that depicts kind of like the archaeology scavengers. Currently, we have done other themes in the past as well. Yeah.
And what brought you into that at the beginning? What made you jump? Because right now it's so powerful a force in your life. There was a point where um, steampunk obviously had it manifested as the foundation for what you're building both personality and life goals on. What made you go there? I'm interested in the story behind how you started making the story.
Hmm. Um, well, when it comes to how I entered the steampunk community, like steampunk is basically something that I've done all my life. It was not, but there was no direction to it. Sometimes I made something for my toy soldiers. I went into Warhammer for quite a few years. Then I started with reenactments by coincidence. So I stopped with Warhammer, which I'm rather happy about. My
Good
God, if I see the
financial
prices
choice.
now, Jesus Christ. But it's yeah, and then I did that for about 14 years. For a long time, I couldn't even imagine doing anything else. But then I got into martial arts, and that was something that I really enjoyed doing. I mean, I had a nearly Olympic amount of stamina at that point. Very glad I did. I would not have the health I had today if I hadn't done that. And yeah, I was looking for new challenges, and then I also was at recommendation of somebody. I started writing again. I'm dyslexic, so that does not come naturally to me at all. But yeah, I started something of a writing of a sci-fi fantasy with a heavy cyberpunk influences, and I did that in Dutch at the time.
Mm.
And yeah, I then figured out there was a nearby steampunk convention very close to near me in Arnhem, in a small venue, a well-known venue, but still. And there I bought. Do I have it here? I do not. But the steampunk. Oh wait, I do have it here. Oh no, that's not a book. But it's a book. The Steampunk Gazette, which is basically it's a kind of a coffee table book. Like it has like 101 examples of expressions of steampunk, ranging from costuming to taxidermy. Very interesting in that regard. The person who wrote is a bit controversial, but so be it. But he also had an interview. Speaking of controversial people, Captain Rob of Ebony Park in there. And there he wrote the phrase, "We are nostalgic for a past that did not exist." And that line really stuck with me. Um, and from the moment I read that line, I got like, oh, I want to explore this. And that basically motivated me to start my first blog, Tupperware Steampunk. And Tupperware Steampunk, after a couple of years, that's for that blog I invented Dankert Lexicon, the guy who now presents the Steampunk Beginner's Guide on Radio Retro Future. And actually, Dankert Lexicon is going to appear as a character in the next book.
Oh.
So, yeah. So
that's wonderful. So this has been a progression through.
It's literally like 12 years in the works now. Yeah.
No,
it's like a continuation of a story. And, for me, steampunk is about stories. And, when I started doing interviews for my research, so to speak, in Dutch. And, and I wanted it to be stories rather than just interviews. Right. So I said, okay, we're going to do an interview, but I want you to come up with like a location where you want to have this interview with this fictional character. And the first one I did with Tockert II. He's a well-known photographer in the steampunk scene in the Netherlands. And, he said, oh, I want to have it in the Big Ben. The Dankert Lexicon and Ruud de Korte have an interview in the Big Ben. And, it's and then that was like the start of Dankert Lexicon as a character, and he, through those adventures he kind of like evolved into this kind of like clanker / hacker as character that used his knowledge to break in, but he also had this tendency to gather information. And the fun thing about it was that it kind of like started connecting all these unrelated steampunks to each other that way. And eventually, I started doing like the podcast on Radio Retro Future. I started doing the first episode of the Steampunk Beginner's Guide with Dankert Lexicon because I already had the costume and I already had the voice. So
right. I see. I love because I can run the parallels with some characters from like the Forgotten Realms, and I'm bringing this up more for the audience because I know most of my audience is going to know what I'm talking about, where you have a character like Volo who goes around the realms, investigating this, that, and the other, and it gives you a point of origin in an area. Now we've talked quite a bit about arcology, in that the term keeps coming up, and I know what it is because I absolutely love it, and you obviously created it. Why don't you give the folks in the chat a little bit of information on what that is, and give them an idea why I'm smiling so very broadly at the delightfulness of it.
Okay. So arcology is a city that is, well, not so much ruled by Dankert Lexicon, who's known there as the founder. He has his tower called Radio Retro Future, or simply known as the Tower. And from there he broadcasts into the multiverse. And like I already mentioned with the interviews, all these steampunk characters kind of like get connected through him. And I was kind of like imagining what would be a truly steampunk city. And I didn't mean like with cocks and gears. I meant with, an actual representation of what the steampunk community really is. And it is all these vaguely connected people that are whose only connection is like that passion, their ability to tell stories in their various worlds. And when I looked at my comments to the videos. Most people were asking, "Oh, I want to build this world. I want to write this book about this world, world this, world that." So I was like, okay, I want to make a series that's set in a multiverse and that's being investigated because I wanted to have that Lovecraftian Robert E. Howard approach to it, where you've got the Association of Ishtar investigating all these worlds that people think, come up with. So yeah, the idea is that anyone can submit their stories, creatures, and even characters to that setting, but seen through the eyes of the Association of Ishtar. And arcology is a very unique place in that multiverse for one particular reason, and that is that in the multiverse, the universe of the Association of Ishtar, a phenomena exists called Traveler's Decay or Traveler's Disease. There's various names, and it basically destroys anything and anyone that leaves its own plane of origin, its own world of origin, for longer than a certain amount of time. The only exception is Elysium, where arcology is located. And Elysium is basically this, what is it, a multi-dimensional space station that's drifting in between worlds, really. And there is another phenomena known to the association as the White Zeppelin that is delivering refugees from all these worlds there that are destroyed. A world gets hit by a comet. The White Zeppelin saves a bunch of those people and brings them to arcology. So arcology is basically this entire settlement of refugees who have no historical back knowledge. Like it's like throwing characters from D&D, BattleTech, Star Trek, Star Wars, and all in the same place. They know nothing about each other or each other's lore, history, culture, religion, language, anything, and that somehow becomes a city. It's rather utopian in that fact, was it not? That they're scavengers. They're in a space station that's completely overgrown with alien life forms, alien plants, reefs, and anything that can survive in there. Well, it survives there for a reason, and so they're surrounded by this Lovecraftian world, but they're also living off that Lovecraftian world, and it's artifacts and stuff. So you have like Zulu warriors walking around with futuristic technology. Essentially, they don't understand it. They think it's practically magic, but they know how to use it. And that's all that matters. So you've got like slingers from antiquity and stuff like that, but maybe some cyborg from some very advanced plane. But
And that's what I love. One, I enjoy interviewing and talking with you because you're one of those great people that I don't have to pull hard to get information. The stories are bubbling right at the surface, and that tells me how much you love it. The passion is right there, and all I have to do is sort of disrupt the top, and it all comes up like hungry fish or something, and because I've looked into arcology. You mentioned you played Warhammer 40K back in the day.
yeah,
Did
painted
you
it
ever
mostly. I
play,
did not really play it, but go ahead.
oh, okay, the lore. Did you do anything with either Necromunda or Mordheim?
Mordheim is I love settings like Mordheim, particularly Stalker.
Okay.
But I really love those essentially post-apocalyptic settings, but surrounded by society, by civilization. The Western. I'm also a big lover of Weird West.
Oh, yes.
And that has that very similar feel. I think that Weird West is actually, it's a shame because steampunk kind of like threw out Weird West, it kind of like forced it away. Whenever we are talking about, and that's the whole problem I have with steampunk as a term, that it's so conflated also with fantasy
Yes.
these days. So I mean, you could have steampunk westerns and like Weird West, which is really like the 19th century sci-fi. So it's a combination of fantasy and science fiction.
Right.
But now it's basically congealed, and Weird West as a term kind of has become obsolete, which is kind of a shame.
I think it's interesting you say that because I like to try to see what might be coming on the horizon. In that, eventually it hits mainstream where they lock on to a concept and people really deep dive explore it for good or ill. And as much as a lot of us are superhero fans, I really think we have been so oversaturated with the superhero genre. And
Yeah.
it's not bashing it. It's just that it's like sitting and eating the same meal every single day.
Yeah.
Um I've been noticing uh several independent video games are coming out with Weird West style themes. I'm
Hard West 2. I played the demo. I streamed it last night. I'm very enthusiastic about it. I loved Hard West 1.
Mhm.
And Hard West 2 is one of those very rare games. It takes, okay, what worked for the first one? Let's expand upon that.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
they did a great job. I think I'm really enthusiastic about. I'm not about all the things, but yeah.
Well,
So far, gameplay wise, I'm really infused. Um,
okay. And that, well, see, that's my kind of where I was going. I think we're going to see another sort of steampunk renaissance in that there is, when I look at steampunk, even if it has cosmic horror, there is an inherent optimism to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this uh it's the spirit of the prospector almost, or the sense that there's adventure and that one person can cause a tremendous amount of change in a given situation. You know, and I think with the levels of real world, for lack of a better word, darkness that have been going on, the depression and stuff from dealing with pandemics and climate change and all this, we're going to need that uh, duality of bittersweet optimism and opposition. And I think that proper steampunk, not just a thin veneer, but really
and
has a lot of
a fantasy with a steampunk aesthetic.
right, has a lot of promise to not only be something I think people will enjoy, but perhaps even something people need. Because I know it's a specific kind of escapism. Eh,
Well, for me, and especially if the range in the machine is it's kind of like reimagining modern issues and the things that play in society through a lens that people do not see the associations I'm making.
Right.
So I mean, what inspired the wrench in the machine was something that was very topical at the time, and no one seems to notice that, which is a good thing, I think, because one of the major issues that we have currently is tribalism.
Yes. Yes.
When one party does one thing, it's bad, but when the other party does the same thing, it's all of a sudden good or is not worthy of discussion anymore. So,
Yes.
and that's one thing that I'm noticing, and uh, that's also the thing of the 24-hour news cycle.
Excellent
Things
point.
that just get black holed. Yeah. Anyway,
No. No. No.
um,
You don't. One. You don't ever need to feel the need to shy away from such observations because one, I obviously share them. In that anyone who's paid attention from a vaguely academic distance can see that this constant polarization that seems to be media driven. And the
mhm.
best way to explore, I find, a concept like that and put the idea out isn't to do it directly, it's to do it through the lens of fiction. I think
Yeah.
that's why the greatest stories we have, they're not necessarily fables, but they're speaking to something that's going
Yeah,
on.
they're speaking to the human condition, and that's an art that is getting lost, in particular in places like Hollywood, and we see the same with Marvel and DC. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
why they're doing so terrible right now. And no matter how much the fans warn them for this, they don't care. I really think it's apathy that's driving that. They just don't care about, you know. I mean, you see the success of the Rippaverse. Um, I really hope it's gonna be successful. That, you know, he's
Yes.
fulfilling the pledges. I mean, it's super successful, of course, but, you know, I hope he lives up to the expectation. You know.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I wish him well. And I hope this is the start of something, of a revolution that are like, oh, maybe these guys should, maybe we should like change. I don't think they will.
I think it won't happen now.
No,
We won't.
no. Eventually they have to, but
What I think, and this is why I support independent creators so passionately, is because the mythology of the future is the fiction that we write today. In that, when we look at modern and my very very American lens, but the mythology that is put out, that has been embraced, that when we talk about a world that's uh, increasingly secular anyway, we still need heroes. We still need
Mhm.
something to believe in bigger than ourselves. And for a
We
lot
need
of
some
us,
form of a shared religious experience. Yeah.
right? And for a lot of people, it actually is the superheroes, or well, that's kind of, for some of us, it was the Star Treks or the Star Wars or Babylon 5 or some, the sci-fi depth. But we need to believe, to power the sometimes irrational optimism that is necessary to survive. Because if we actually understood the odds, we couldn't, as a species, function.
Mhm.
I really believe if people understood physics, for example, on large scale, and they really grasped the forces involved, no one could drive on a highway. Because if they
Yeah.
fully
Yeah.
understood that that little stripe of paint does nothing.
Well, safe goes for safety, right? I mean, more people die in car accidents than any other activity, and yet we are more terrified of going up a ladder than we are moving in traffic.
Well, I think it comes to well, if you look and you talk to people, and I've done this because I was asking. Well, part of it is I teach Western martial arts, and I teach it as defense, and I have found time and time again people are more scared of a knife than a gun, and the
Yeah.
reason for that is the gun, for the vast majority of humanity, is an abstract. They understand the fiction of it, they understand that, but the knife is a reality because just about everyone has cut themselves.
Hmm. That too. Well, there is also an interesting quote from English soldiers fighting in India in the 19th century,
Yes.
that they were more terrified of being shot with arrows than being shot with guns. And well, the thing is, you see the arrow coming at you, and bullets, you don't. When you see the bullet, it's too late.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
No,
it,
it's fascinating, and see, that's because you're the first guest I've brought on this program, and I wanted someone who was diverse in concept, that we could have these meandering conversations, because you will be on programs in the near future, and you have to be, where people will be like, today we've got Bonsart Bokel, and he has this Kickstarter. We're going to break down and talk about the tiers, and we're going to talk about what you get for your money, and da 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 da. And
Mhm.
you know,
Well,
I'm
my book, by the time the Kickstarter is over, my second book might be done. So
wonderful, and there will be a lot of shill shows, and they're important because they, I feel they help us promote the independent creators. That's why I normally run a whole bunch of commercials for people and stuff to help. I'm just trying to help folks. But for me, as you know, my take on this program, as somebody who goes on YouTube a lot, I want to know the people, because I think the story of the people behind necessary, the story itself, and behind even the here's the sale of my story, are in part what makes me care. Because we either have to operate where we have total death of the creator, which I'm fine with. I love H.P. Lovecraft. I understand that he was a xenophobic, racist.
Well, did they also tell you that he recanted those views?
Yes, he did. He did.
But they don't mention that, do they?
No, they don't.
Unlike H.G. Wells, by the way.
True.
Who was a fucking National Socialist.
Yes.
And a fervent supporter of Stalin and everything that he did, including like the purges and the Holodomor and everything.
So and it's fascinating that we still have these controversial people, and we have to take, because you in the steampunk community, you yourself are somewhat controversial in certain circles. And
but they don't never talk about me, so I don't know. Maybe they do. I have no idea.
But my point being, but if you're creating something of value, that's one thing that I see them as parallel stories. They don't need to necessarily overlap unless you're looking at the origin of and reflection of both. What your stories say about you versus what you say about your stories is a fascinating dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of metacognition, but when you let's go back to something interesting. When you are either writing for the Association of Ishtar,
mm-hmm.
or you're reviewing submissions, which people can submit. I believe it's free. There's no payment out of it, but you can be part of the universe. It's again very much like the SCP Foundation
mm-hmm.
in format. What do you look for? What makes you say, this story or this character or really belongs here?
Now I have to dig, because I actually wrote some articles on this. I wrote a primer for how to write an associate and what they are. Well, first of all, what I think is like the quality of the writing itself. Second of all, I did one competition. I only had 2 submissions, but still, they taught me a lot on what I should communicate and what people do not understand. But there's also this issue with novice writers overall. But like, especially with the files, which I really have to get back to at some point. Right now, I'm working on short stories for my third book, which is an exploration of, basically of Igraine and her doll Enwyn, who has come to life.
Yes.
So at one end, there's like a lot of those two going through their relationship issues. Because this young woman now has to take care of a doll. I want to do kind of like a prelogue story of who Igraine was before the doll came to life, which is kind of like this bit of an unhinged, a bit unhinged young associate who, she has no one in her life but herself, essentially. So she acts that way. And when Enwyn comes around, at the end of the story, it's like, oh, well, I want to do this, but, Enwyn is watching. So is that like a good, she becomes a parent in a sense. So, she's no longer she can no longer be the brash girl. I mean, I do fear that relationship is not going to end well because of basically who Igraine is and her drive to achieve certain things. So I'm not sure if it's going to have like a good ending in that regard, the relationship, I mean.
Right.
But yeah, so there's really this exploration. And I recently had a wonderful review on my Amazon. And it really, I really have conveyed what I want to achieve, which is it's an exploration. It's not, the character already knows everything. There's gonna be like these whole pages just talking about how the world is like, or how the officer corps operates. I recently had one of those, what was it, a military sci-fi, and the guy enters a room where there's a fancy dinner with the officers, and it has like this entire 2 pages on how the officer corps operates. Like, No, you're supposed to write about a guy who's tending dinner. I don't need to know what flavor crayon these officers enjoy when they were little. um, and so that's how I write. I write very pulpy, very to the point. It's about the scenes. If I feel there is a need for background information, like there's one line, exceptional cases, there's two lines explaining a little bit about the background, and so that's how I write. So you see everything through the eyes of the characters. The character explores something new that you have not seen before. I'm not going to explain what a police station is. You know what a police station is, but when there is some outlandish building, I'm going to explain it, because that's what the character sees, and it's about the relationship of the character with that building, in which case it's new, it's alien, he doesn't understand it, like, what is it doing here?
Right.
So that's how I write it, and I really get a lot of comments, that the readers like experience the same thing as the character does.
And
And
so what paraphrasing, then this way I make sure I understand, make sure the audience understands. This runs very parallel to the exposition dumps
yes,
that you see in so many modern novels, and very much in the dialogue of modern comics, or mainstream might be a better word than modern.
yep,
But and what you are following the classic show don't tell mentality, and you
yes,
seem to respect your reader. Now, when somebody's been writing as long as you have and has produced as much as you have in both volume and, frankly, word count, if you were more Tolkienish in your descriptions, having seen the sheer thickness of your book, they need a wheelbarrow. So your brevity with so much else going on is what makes them very readable, I would think. And that's a powerful lesson that many newer authors, because we have a lot of people who watch this program, and they message me direct because they're afraid to rub elbows in the comments, which is utterly ridiculous. Please, if you're ever on my show, get in the comments. And I am obligated to at least once say, please like, share, and subscribe this. I would like Bonsart to get more views in other venues that he hasn't thus far.
especially my Weird West story. I have one Weird West story, and it barely got any views, and it might be one of my best works. So, yeah.
Well, then, if you could throw throw it in the private chat, I should be able to throw it into the comments.
Yeah, let me look it up, because the title is, but I'm looking for it right now. But yeah, go ahead with your question.
But what I like to ask what works, what doesn't. What when you pick up a story and you see somebody has written the story and they're like, here, I want to add this. What absolutely makes you say no?
The quality of the writing. I mean, if the quality of writing, I think, is subpar, or there's just too much to remark upon, I will try and say, well, I see you make, because it's not, when writers make particular mistakes in their writing, it's not just once. They do that over and over again. So when somebody asks me to proofread something for them and I don't know them, I ask them, submit me your first 5 lines of your story, which is generous, because usually, with 3.
Right.
So submit your first 3 lines. I also, in my Discord, I have a section called Submit Your Lines, where aspiring writers can submit 3 lines, and then we can critique it. And that's can be more work than a lot of writers think. Because people can make a lot of mistakes in 3 sentences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's why we've got that. And if I say this, you immediately see if it's either an experienced writer or not. Well, when that part is over, I can look at the rest of the story. Well, with the Association of Ishtar stuff, um, first of all, I made a mistake when I started this because I thought that the SCP formula would be an easy thing because they're files. There's things that are supposed to exist in the world. They are they don't have the complexity of writing good fiction. At least I thought. But then then I started looking over all these submissions, and a lot of people do not know how to use, for example, the redacted trope. The blanking out stuff. Which they use for, I can't be bothered to make up a place name, so I'm gonna blank it out. As a result, you have no clue what the hell is going on because when I start a scene or when I start in a new location, I try to establish who, what, where, and when. Like who are entering the new area, what is the new area, what is the impression I want characters to have of that area. So I'm very strict with that. I want to know exactly when I come in. I'm entering a place that's smelling of sulfur, etc., etc. And that is also something that I really noticed that people comment on. When I'm doing my writing workshops, I will probably do a new writing workshop when I got the Kickstarter up and running for Kickstarter participants. But
now I have to ask for a second, and the services you've mentioned, send me 3 lines and we'll critique it. Is that something you're doing free of charge for people?
Yeah. That's for anyone who's on the Discord. Yeah. Well, however, we do expect that they do the same for the other participants in that thread.
Right. And see, this is what I find it very refreshing to me, because there are a lot of people, especially in America, who attempt to monetize every skill and service they have. You know what I'm saying? And for you to just simply, here, this is out here. I'm doing it because it serves the greater community at large and helps when people do what you're doing, it helps produce better writers. By producing better writers, that means the media we intake becomes better, and it's very much a intellectual gardening process. And I applaud anyone who helps sort through the manure, frankly, to get the dirt right, to grow some of these great ideas. And while that seems almost trivial, it's something you said very in passing because it's just something that makes sense for you to do. I don't know if you see the intrinsic value over time of you consistently doing something like that. And that's the kind of thing that I feel needs to be commented on and really rewarded, because you're out here, and yes, by all means, Bonsart's books are amazing and they do warrant commercial support. But on top of their own innate value, I think there has to be some value assigned to the simple services you are providing and the good it does to the world. And that's why I wanted people like you on, because there are people out here who are in the background, even if they're doing something dramatic like Radio Retrofuture. I mean, if you want one word to describe Radio Retrofuture, dramatic is a great word for it. It's a wonderful YouTube program. There's a wonderful flavor to it, and I find it very palate cleansing, because I see a lot of things that may be amusing, but they're cloying in that there's not much depth or intellect to them. There's lots of funny or anger-inducing or emotional-inducing things on YouTube, which has fast become my primary source of entertainment, because most of standardized television doesn't interest me anymore. I hate to put it that way, but I have to
same here. Yeah,
dig through. But I treat it just like I would treat books. There are millions of books out there. Only some really catch me, but I find much more interest in YouTube because it's such a, again, diverse format once you find what you like. So I do encourage folks definitely to subscribe to Radio Retro Future. And because that's also a very good jumping point, because from there you can get all Bonsart's links.
Yeah.
And
I also have like video stories of the Association of Ishtar on there as well for the people who are interested in that.
yes,
So you can have like an audio story. I would like to have more, but I just don't have the time. I really either more people need to support me on Patreon so I can afford like editors and stuff, or I need like a small group of volunteers who will do that legwork for me. Because
and what is your Patreon?
Patreon, I think it's just Radio Retro Future. Let me check. I do post there like early versions of. I've got a Patreon and a Subscribestar both, by the way.
Wonderful.
So for those who don't like Patreon as a company, you can support me there. And at the looks of things, you can find me as Bonsart on Radio Retro Future. Let me see. It's radio patreon.com radio_retro future.
All right. So see, I love Patreon, not because you're not purchasing a single use good. You know, I put out books, I put out videos, you know, and some you could obviously purchase. But what you're doing is you're supporting the everything else. So by supporting Bonsart's Patreon, you're supporting his ability to do things like provide these workshops for aspiring and improving authors. And we should all see ourselves as both aspiring and improving. No matter how much you publish, no matter how much you create, keeping that sense of humility and hunger will always make your stuff better, in my opinion. And let me see. Did you send me?
Yeah, I sent you both to subscribe on the Patreon page. Yeah.
One moment.
So, and right now, people who support me on Patreon, they get early access to my news stories. So they get them a week earlier. And currently, I'm writing the Enwin, the Adventures in Responsible Doll Ownership series, which I'm really proud of. And,
I am so excited because I read the stories that you sent me in that series, and I just pasted that in the wrong. Sorry, I tried to jump to the comments, and I'm doing a little bit of multitasking, which Lord knows I'm a devout monotasker. I do one thing, I do it extraordinarily well, I move on to the next. That's an old joke, but what I want you folks to, and I've put the links up both to Patreon and Radio and Subscribestar. I want you guys to think about supporting Bonsart there. I'd almost rather plug people's things like Patreon more than I would their individual, because the Patreon is an evergreen thing. I would also, while I have you here, I would love to consider inviting you for a panel show at some point with like Brian and a few others to eventually talk about a panel show for newer writers, and the subject of how to
sounds fun.
would be fascinating. Sure. And it's one of those. I'm still working on the format since I took over this channel, took over this program. I've had this goofy channel for some time, and I was neglecting it before I did this. But thank you, seriously. I know you're an incredibly busy person, and I know you're doing so much for the community. I really do appreciate you coming on, and I really do appreciate the passion behind your works, because I admire that you don't feign aloofness. You know, that's something I think it's too aggrandized. You know, that when you get talking about your world or your stories, I could see you start to go. You know, where that's the great of any. That's one of my personal tests. I'm very expression oriented. when you can hear someone talking about their world and their eyes go up, you're not looking at the camera, you're not looking at the screen, you're looking at sort of the overlay, and you can almost the beauty, I think, and the importance of what we do is we are multiversal travelers, every one of us. We just do it as a mental exercise. Our physical body may be rooted here, but our minds can journey to these incredible worlds. And people like Bonsart literally live the dream of, he scavenges through this other plane of thought and existence and brings out these ideas. And for those of us, the daydreamers, the movers and shakers, the people who go outside, we need to support each other, because the ability to do that, I think, sometimes comes at the cost of being able to deal with mundanity properly. I could build. You could tell me what you wanted. I could build a whole world, lay a continent down, and tell you who's in it out of nowhere. But having to balance my taxes and keep the numbers from flipping around because I too am dyslexic, that's not going to happen. It's just it's a great challenge. So thank you so much. I would stay on for another hour or two, but unfortunately my wife has a doctor's appointment I have to take her to. So I'm going to have to call it. If there are no other questions in the comments, I want to give everybody a chance. I think you were a unique and interesting enough guest that it silenced my comments. So this is
yeah.
a rare and amazing thing to see, because I love my commenters and my chat is very, very active normally. So that tells you that they literally just shut up and listened to you.
Well, I hope that is it.
Absolutely.
What time does it launch?
I've been watching the numbers.
What time does it launch tomorrow? I think I'm gonna launch it at 2:30 p.m. Central Eastern Time, European time. Sorry. The reason for that is originally we're doing a launch stream at 3 p.m. Central Eastern Time. Alexander Johan is gonna come on the show. Maybe Vendor is going to join us, who's my co-host of the Arcology podcast. You have to be on the Arcology podcast too at some point to talk about your favorite film, Nick. Nick, you're welcome to join us for the launch stream. We can talk specifically about the art. I have no idea what I'm doing tomorrow, but Alexander is going to draw live on screen, so we'll see what we're gonna work on. And I have no idea what to expect from it. I just saw that my promoter Lisa had some complaints about the stretch goals I just presented to her. So
we'll shortly let you go and let you check that out. I do hope, having seen the art that for this book, because it is not, having seen it, I would not put it, if you're thinking coloring book art, you're thinking wrong. You really need to think of it as the uncolored and unlettered comic panels to give you a sense of the quality of this. And I truly hope you can...
and each of them has a story attached to them. They're not just, some random images. They actually have stories combined with them. And very important for the artists in the chat, we have a coloring contest for the Variant C cover. So I should have probably mentioned that earlier, but So go check that out. If you go to associationofashtar.com, it's there in big letters on top, contest. So and there you can choose from 4 coloring pages you can draw, and we do allow multiple submissions. So there's a deadline of probably September 1st. I need to be more specific about that.
That is wonderful. I have a couple mild announcements I have to do, and then we'll end the show. To the folks who are planning to come up next week to the park in Hobart, Indiana, where we were doing the sword demo to be an intro for Julius Caesar. That's being put out by the Gary Shakespeare Company. Yes, Gary, Indiana does have a Shakespeare Company. There was a conflict in scheduling. Somebody wrote something wrong, and it will actually be this Sunday at 5 o'clock. We should be starting our sword fight demo between 5 and 6, and the play itself should start at 7. Sorry for the late notice. I literally found out about a minute and a half before Bonsart came on before the show to let me know this was going on. So if you have any questions, contact Joe Bachman. He knows what's going on. I hope anyone in the area can meet me there. I do love the chat. It was great seeing you guys. I watched everything go through. Thank you again, Bonsart, for coming by. And I will have you on again one way or another.
Looking
And
forward to it.
best of luck in all your productions, because I really think you're putting out quality and intellectual diversity that we need. So, guys, I will be actually today is Wednesday, so I will be on LukeStoneStudios.com's YouTube channel for Nerd Bacon at 9 a.m. my time, which makes that I want to say 3 p.m. yours, because I'm trying to learn. I'm going to make a chart of the time differences between all the people I know, for like you and Mike, Jimmy, Lorsha, DeBron. I'm working on my pronunciations, but speech impediment and pronunciations always clash.
Yes,
But
we know.
I will also be here Friday morning at 10 o'clock for another Nevermind the Furthermore, and Friday night at 8 for the Historical Fencing Guild on the Historical Fencing Guild channel. Until then, folks, remember, write your stuff down, because you can always edit it, but you cannot edit a blank page. I will see you soon. Thanks again, Bonsart, and let's close this up.
Yes.